intermittently sort of coming into the room, as it were, and I won't stop and have us introduce ourselves to them or anything, because there's lots we can talk about. There's a lot of other dirt we want to talk about besides the people in the room. Put it that way. And I've been on some courses lately on Zoom. It's so easy, and I just want to call out some of the really major players that I'm going to refer to in this little kitchen table meeting. Lecture sounds a bit formal, but a farmer in Nebraska, Gabe Brown, an Amishman in New York named John Kempf, Elaine Ingham is in California, Ray Archuleta is in Missouri, J.M. Fortier is in Quebec, Graham Bell is in permaculturist in England. And I mention their names now because I want you to feel like that what you're getting is my attempt to package this in a way that it's coming from, I mean, I didn't make it up. It's coming from the players who are making their living with this information. And it's been a sea change in the last few years. As I get around to sharing my screen here, the sea change has been to get people realizing that the soil is alive. The soil is actually a living entity, a living organism, which various and even to the point now where some new research out of Australia is suggesting that maybe maybe plants aren't herbivores. Plants maybe are carnivores. They're absorbing, some way eating bacteria around their root hairs. That's fascinating new science that's breaking out. Can everybody see this screen? It says Soil Health Workshop. No, I better do that the other way around. Anybody who can't see it? All right. I'm going to flick through here as we go. The permaculture lab is this. We worked at a mission statement. We're about building resilience in the community to live well under conditions of the climate crisis, going through the disruptions, through growing our connections with people, with the biodiversity of our bioregion, and the practices of permaculture. We live in an Eden. We live in a Garden of Eden, and we're blessed with nature's presence here in the valley. Look how many fingers, urban, rural fingers there are coming in around all this, the built up space where 25,000 people live. Action 13 represents or speaks, is trying to gather people from the whole of Ward 13, and that's another 10,000 people out in the rural. I want to give you the view from 30,000 feet first. We could do a talk on each of these things. Maybe we will. We're not going to do the solar energy chemical thing today, but that's very, very important. We're not going to do the water cycle much today, but the soil carbon sponge is a very key piece of our stability of our world. Some would argue that the hydrological cycle is more important than the carbon cycle for destabilizing or restabilizing our climate. Of course, we have a diversity of players in our community. The mammals, the protozoa, the archaea, the bacteria, and the plants. And we will be getting into that a little bit. But the bottom corner is the so-called biogeochemical system. We're cycling nutrients all the time, and we need to have that done more consciously, more deliberately, and we can practice it. We can shift our consciousness in the way we treat our own property, our own yards, our parkland, and so on. That's Ray Archuleta down there in the corner. He's having a look on his face like he's wondering why I stole his slide. I didn't ask him permission. He was just on a course just this week. Gabe Brown's a farmer on 5,000 acres, believe it or not, who was going broke 10 years ago because he was farming conventionally. And after a couple of years of trying to do it the same way, only harder, he shifted, and now he's doing it in the what we would call regenerative agriculture way, which is what permaculture has been rebranded as. So this is the big picture of what I want to share with you today. You don't need to know any science, but you need to remember 7 points. And I've got pictures to help that happen. And by the way, question, I can't see the chat at the minute, so I'm going to rely on Deborah to be monitoring chat. But if you all want to break in at any point because I'm speaking obtusely, just speak out and I will hear you. I can't see everybody on the screen, so I don't know if you've got your hand up. 7 points. Don't till the ground. Always leave it covered. Try to have live roots in your gardens 12 months a year. Remember biology rules, not physics. Yeah, there are amendments we need to make to the soil. We need to rotate the plants according to type, and we need to make sure there's a diversity of plants, 7, 10, 12, 15 things growing in one little patch. So I want to, no inversion, no tilling. The reason for this is nature doesn't do it. We're trying to grow nature. We're trying to grow food, and that's why we want fertile soil. And in the same way that it happens naturally, so that we don't degrade the fertility, the nutrients that are there. So this is a picture of what not to do. My neighbor does it 3 or 4 times a year. And when I go out and I look at their garden versus my garden in a big rainstorm, and theirs is flooding, it's on a slight slope. The water is muddy brown, just running off the garden. I go over and look at mine. I should have put a picture of mine in here, actually. I didn't. I have my beds with grass medians in between them. And so they act as little dams and sponges. When the water comes down the hill, it soaks into the bed. If there's too much, it soaks into the grass. So that stays there till the next rain. That's why we don't want to invert the soil upside down and put the high biologically active soil underneath the subsoil. We want to leave it right where nature intends it to be. You can build a garden this way. This is a version of what I do, and I should say I've picked my slides and my comments directing more towards the home gardener. You folks in your backyards or on your verandas with containers can be doing all these 7 points. Here in this one, what do we see? We see that it'd be very easy to just cultivate this soil a little bit with a garden fork in between our crops, in between our seasons. One crop was going to be finished, and typically we're going to be able to put 2 or maybe 3 crops in the same bed in our growing in our bioregion, our hardiness zone, which up here where I am is 5B, down in the Burlington area is so-called 6A, and that's based on how cold it gets in the winter. We want to keep our garden growing areas green or brown, but always covered. Anybody recognize what's in this picture besides the little scarecrow? Yeah, go ahead. Shout it out.
Buckwheat.
Yeah. Which one's the buckwheat?
The right and left.
Mm-hmm. So this gardener has surrounded their kale with buckwheat. Maybe buckwheat's it's not a wheat. It's a very easy growing I can't tell you the family, but it's not a wheat. You can get it up here at Quick Feeds or at Dam Seeds. Grows lots of biomass, lots of bulk very quickly. So if you've got a time when you want to leave your garden space bare between after harvesting or before planting first thing, hand scatter some buckwheat out there. Don't let it go to seed like this is. This is now flowering. If you let it grow to seed, you're going to have buckwheat coming up again. um, you know, so just get in there with a lawnmower or a hoe or a scythe and cut it all down. Now you've got something we call green manure to feed your soil organisms. Here's another example. This gardener has got it's a great example for many reasons, but in the pathways they've got wood chips to keep from getting mucky. They probably raised their beds up a little bit, so on the sides of the bed where the plants are a little higher, there's mulch in there. It looks to me like very dark soil anyway, and then down in the trough is wood chips. And they'll get mucked in, they'll get walked on, and eventually they'll pull those wood chips up and put them on the beds. And so that's a way of feeding the soil. It's a nice point for me to have a little segue into what is the biodiversity in the soil. Wood chips or wood material, lignin-rich material feeds the fungi. And the fungi are the ones we want, especially the family called mycorrhiza. They're the ones that build a symbiotic relationship with the plant root hairs. And the plant says, here, I've got some sugar. Elaine Ingham says, the plant says, I've got some cake. I need some selenium. Who can go and find me some selenium in the fungal hyphal network? And so they bring them together, exchange cake for selenium or cobalt or boron in the micronutrients. And the plant is happy and the fungi are happy. So that's why wood chips are good. Here's another way of doing it. This is a particular technique that keeps the ground covered. If you don't want to dig up your sod, you can lay your garden down on top of it. You cut your grass real short, maybe water it a bit, maybe let it get dry. Well, you should water it anyway. And then you're going to lay down cardboard or newspaper right on top of that grass. And then some compost, and then some wood chips, and some manure, and maybe a bit of soil in there. And these layers are right like you see it. You can plant your transplants right through those layers, cut a hole in the cardboard. The longer you wait to do that, of course, the easier it'll be, because right away the worms are going to be coming up and eating the wood fiber in the cardboard. And by the end of the year, one season, you're going to have beautiful, lush soil. This is what we did at Cynthia's garden on Winston. We didn't till the soil at all. We just laid down these layers, and away we went. So we want in our gardens, the third point is living roots. You might say, well, that's hard to do in the winter. And darn, but I really should have taken a picture out my window right here of our vegetable garden, because we didn't clean it up last fall. We left all the trash in the beds. The big woody stems like this of the brassicas and the kales and the squashes, the tomato plants are all in there. Now, believe it or not, those roots are going to live long after the top has died off. And if I go out there now, some of them are turning green already. The spinach is greening up. Some of the kale plants are starting over. Why do we want that? Well, we need to feed the fungi all winter long. They're the ones that are going to be producing the mycorrhizal fungal networks to make this trade and barter system going on with the plant roots. So the picture here shows that, maybe touched up by the artist. What you see is root hairs reaching out in all directions, further than the plant can reach itself. Let me pause for a minute, see if there's any questions or comments. Anything in the,
I have a question. It's Deborah. Um, I I use wood chips a lot, and I've heard that they rob the soil of nitrogen. How much of an issue do you think that is? Or is it?
uh, yeah, it's an issue. I don't think it's a big one. Um, Especially if you're putting composted wood chips on your gardens. At your place, I know most of that is fairly well rotted wood chips. The issue with fresh wood chips is that uh, um, uh, they attract the bacteria to go and start oxidizing the wood chips down, and they take the biology, that soil food web, away from the soil around the plant roots. So don't put fresh wood chips down unless it's in the pathway. And if you got a corner of your garden where you're going to get a drop from a local chip company, you just leave it piled up there. Throw a few other things in it as well. As it's going to be a kind of a woody compost pile, but eventually it'll be all set to go in your garden.
I have
Okay.
another question. I don't mean to take up the airtime. Did anyone else have a question before I? No-till, low-till, and full-till. We see, when I drive out in the country, I see tilled fields. And how can all of those farmers be wrong?
They don't think they're wrong, and they would have been right from after the Second World War, when the chemical manufacturers figured out they couldn't make weapons, munitions anymore. They had to make something, so they figured out they could turn their guns and kill bugs instead, and funguses. So they got sold on the idea of you don't need to feed your soil. You just need to put chemicals on your soil, and your cropping is going to be just fine. You don't need to cover your soil. Secondly, those farmers out there are having a hard time making a living, and every time they go over the ground with their equipment one more time, it takes time away from something else. It takes fuel, and it takes wear and tear. So they keep the number of times they travel over their land to as few as possible. Now along comes the organic movement, which started actually also in the 50s with Albrecht and Rodale, and they were persona non grata. They just couldn't win against the DuPonts and the Monsantos of the world with major marketing programs to convince these farmers to stop farming what was the conventional way prior to the World War. Put the manure on the ground, rotate your crops through the fields. Don't plant the same thing twice in the same from one year to the next. That was conventional. So nowadays, those farmers are out here in Flamborough, as you say, mostly bare soil, but it's getting better. Uh, they're learning, because now, guess what? They can't afford GMO seed and the additives that they need to put on it, the chemicals and fertilizers, and those are both coming from fossil fuels. And some of them even aware that fossil fuels are getting scarce. They're going to have to change one of these days. They've been told. My last point is they've been told that they can't make the same yield if they don't use GMO seed and chemical fertilizers. Well, the people who are doing it are proving that wrong. Yields go down a little bit, but they've saved tons of money by the inputs and the time on the field. So the net should be a metric of gross profit, gross margin per acre, not yields of corn per acre. And if they're really into it, they're going to be saying, you know what? As soon as we can measure the nutritional value of our crop, then we'll be able to say we're getting a gross profit nutritional bonus that we can take to our processors and even our direct customers and say, my food is better, and here's why. Higher nutritional, and there's a meter out there on the market now in prototype stage. I've got one that can measure good, better, best nutrition in a carrot or tomato or a lettuce or flour. Long answer to a short question. Good one though.
Thank you.
Let's cruise along here, and I'm not keeping track of the time. Why is my page not? Won't let me. I know why too. Won't let me cycle. Okay, I guess I did cycle. Next rule, number 5, biology rules. And this is the famous, no, 4, the famous chart that set Elaine Ingham on the road to fame. I listened to her tell the story of, as a young PhD student, asking her advisors, should I figure out what biology is in the soil? And they told her, don't waste your time. Nobody will hire you. You won't pay for your education that way. But this chart has been picked up. It's famous now. And these are the different trophic levels. This is what rules in the soil. She will tell you that not pretty much, by far and away, the most of the nutrient, the mineral nutrient that's in the soil is already there everywhere. Maybe it's a bit down deep. Maybe the soil's been degraded. But if you can bring your biology back, your bacteria, your fungi, nematodes, protozoas, arthropods, each of those is mainly feeding on each other. You will get the minerals to come back in your soil, in your garden. If your garden is in a new lot in somewhere in one of these subdivisions here around town, they've stripped off the topsoil, sold half of it and put half of it back right on top of the clay, the subsoil. You don't have much bacteria in soil food life. You might need to do some supplementation, which is mineral amendments. We'll talk about that. But basically, with things like bokashi, things like active composting, and things that you can buy in a jug that are biostimulants, you're trying to feed these little critters on this picture, who in turn are going to feed your carrots. If you can't, now I bet the question in somebody's mind is, how do I know if I got biology? How do I know if my soil is healthy or not? Well, to not spend the money at it, you go out and you dig a hole and you count the worms. Take, an average is a square spade of soil, it's about like that. And you spread it on a tarp, a piece of plastic, spread it all around, count the worms. Do that in a couple places in your garden. If you don't have at least 10 worms in that much soil, like a cubic foot, you got some work to do. So then later on, take a picture of that. That's the easiest way. And then the worms, put them back, of course. And then do it again in the midsummer or in the fall. That's the easiest. Because the worm is basically the top of the food chain in the soil. And he's eating microbes. He's eating everything that's going through his gut, and exuding those little turds up there on the top, turricelles, they call it in French, and there's glomalin in that. And that's what gives you your soil structure. The soil is not going to be powdery. It's going to have little clumpy, healthy soil. It's going to have clumpy bits in it, the worm is the partner that helps you do that. We will be doing some amending of our soil from time to time, or if we're going to dig a hole and put some fruit tree in the ground. And a lot of these things are hard to find. But in Brantford, there's a new shop that I just discovered, so I have a free plug for them. They don't even know it. Black Swallow Living Soils. You can get every single thing you might ever need to feed your soil. Black Swallow Living Soils. Check their website. And I'm going to be putting some of these like bone meal and blood meal in my planting holes for my trees. A plug for me at Old 99 Farm. I got a dozen cows. They poop 50 pounds of manure every day. I give them organic straw and moldy hay to bed on, and it makes. And I put wood chips in there and rock flour powders all winter long. I take it out and I build this window that you see here. Uh, and what I'm indicating is how far it has already shrunk in size because the bacteria is alive inside of there. And if I put my hand in it, I'd scald my skin. It's hotter than the hottest water. It's 145 degrees in there, 145 Fahrenheit. And I produce that for sale as active living compost for people to amend their gardens with. Okay, number 5 is that was amendments. That was number 5. Number 6, we're coming into the home stretch.
Yeah,
Is well,
can you use any animal from the farm, or are cows just the best for their manure?
it's cow manure. There is some chicken manure in there because we do keep a flock of chickens, and there might be 1 or 2 dead chickens that have decomposed themselves by the time it gets put in the windrow there. Does that answer your question?
Oh, I was just wondering, like, does it have to be cow manure, or like any type of bokashi? Does that work?
Okay, good question. No, it doesn't have to be any. In fact, there is um, these things have a way of going around. A little segue on manure, though. When I got started 12 years ago, Elliot Coleman was the go-to guy for organic gardening. The New Organic Grower was his book. It's still in print. And he said, I don't use cow manure. Later on, a few years later, I'm on a YouTube watching him talk about, I've decided to use cow manure. I've got a cow. I buy some cow manure. I make sure it's well composted. There's things that you get in cow manure that you can't get in composted biomass. So wood chips, green vegetation, uh, eggshells, I suppose, those things that are all going to decompose on their own when you put them in an active pile. You're going to turn it over well, on various schedules. The easiest way though is just leave it, intermix your green and your brown, your leaf or your straw, and it'll do just fine that way, 50-50. And then fast forward to so now everybody's using cow manure or animal manure because you want the mineral which is in there. And now just this last month, John Kempf, current reigning guru in organic gardening in the States, says, I've decided to tell people don't use mineral-based compost. Whoa, this is a big new shock to the system. And there's reasons for that. But suffice it to say, it boils down to cows poop out a lot of potassium. And if you have too much cow manure, you're going to have an oversupply of potassium in your garden soil, which could stunt some of your plants. Not a big worry at the scale we're talking about in home gardening. All right. Crop rotation is this piece that we're talking about now. If you grow the same plant in the same place every year, it's good. Some plants are heavy feeders. Some plants are light feeders. A heavy feeder would be a tomato or a potato, the Solanaceae family. A light feeder might be maybe spinach and maybe brassicas. Don't quote me on that. So the simplest way is don't plant the same either the same family if you're into knowing the biology of your crops, or simply just rotate them by what part of them you're growing them for. Is it for the root? Is it for the leaf? Say like a leek or a lettuce? Is it like for the fruit, like a tomato or a pepper? Or have you got it in there as a legume, which is a seed? The legumes are the peas and the beans, which have the double benefit of their nitrogen fixing plants, and you're always going to want to have them in your garden, even as a cover crop after you finish gardening for the year. Get some some clover seed at the hardware store or at William Dam, sprinkle it on there, and you're going to have legumes growing, keeping your green cover all year long. Like I said, always covered. That was rule number 3. And finally, uh, we want diversity. Plant nature doesn't produce things all of one kind, and neither should we. I'm not saying you should have roosters and geese and ducks in your garden at home, but I actually do think some of us should do that. The city has got a trial out right now. Maybe it's over, but they got 2 or 3 gardens in one in each ward who are going to have some chickens in their backyard. Well, that's a great idea. But it's and putting another layer on this biodiversity. For the moment, I'm speaking to you about diverse crops. Most of us are going to want a good garden that looks like it's planted by a German or a Dutch or somebody. Straight rows, all the same thing in the same in the same row. But a permaculture garden is going to be, things are going to be a bit curvy on the contour. They're going to be interplanted, some species with another. That wreaks havoc on your idea of rotating. But really now you're doing the rotating all in one season. So we want to try this diversity in our gardens. Put flowering plants in with your vegetables. Put vegetables up in your front garden. It's going to help your soil. All of this is, believe it or not, this has been an hour just about how do we get fertile soil. And this is the closing of the Big 7. When you put different plants next to each other in the soil, guess what? There's diversity underground as well. And those mycorrhizal fungi I was talking about, there's thousands, maybe tens of thousands of species. We don't know how many there are. And every root of every plant has a thing called the phenomenon is called quorum sensing. Plants will sense, all these organisms, let's say the fungal hyphae, in a certain set of species, when they get to be enough of them, they will reproduce. They will go produce spores. Likewise, the plants, when they sense there's enough of a certain kind of fungus out there, they'll be able to put the chemical signal, the enzyme down that says, I need selenium, I need cobalt. So when we have diversity above ground, just remember we have diversity underground. This is a one slide, for the people who are really wanting to get their money's worth. It's the same version as Gabe Brown's, only from J.M. Fortier. You'll see many ideas in here. I'm not going to read them all out, that are exactly the same 7 as Gabe Brown was talking about. Use a broad fork, not a tiller. Use the wood chips. You might wonder what occultation is. I did. We aren't getting out there with the Ouija board and trying to conjure up the spirits to tell us what to plant. It's not that kind of occult. It is a word that means cover your garden bed with something dark. So, for example, landscape fabric or silage tarps, which you can get from the dairy farmers, and put that on your beds in between your cropping. That'll warm it up a little bit. It'll cause the weed seeds that are in there to sprout, and then before you plant, go in there, just rough it up a little bit with your cultivator. You've now occulted your garden bed. This is in the same ideas in the form of a pyramid. This is John Kempf. I'm giving you this as a just because I'm trying to credential myself with what the experts out there are saying. You're teaming with the microbes. You're feeding the fungi. You're covering the bare soil with cover crops, either intercropping or in between. You're making sure you add compost. I didn't mention the other one. I didn't mention about compaction, but that is a little bit about having raised beds and pathways. don't walk on your garden. Um, don't even run your rototiller over the garden. Do it from the edge. So if we were trying to apply a principle of educational theory, we'd say, who can remember the seven principles? But since they're on your screen already, I guess there's not much point. I wanted to bring you in another permaculture designer from England. I've just met him online. And he's saying, well, to grow healthy soil, healthy food, is there a secret? What's the secret? And he says, no, there really isn't one secret. It's a group of things. We've covered pretty much everything here on this list. I can't see the bottom part of it just because I got to move that over there a little bit. And
can you comment on trees for life?
Sure. He's saying, well, context. Most of what we're interested in our gardens are annuals, the flowers and vegetables. Not too many of them are perennials, and hardly any of them that we're interested in as a rule are shrubs and trees. But if you put trees in your garden, you're expanding the biodiversity by layers, by not just from annuals to perennials, but from low growing plants all the way up to the cover forest. So you want trees for life because they act as a polyculture in 3 dimensions. They attract the birds, just for one, and another one, not so much for soil. Well, yes, it is for soil, but believe it or not, trees are the biggest source of fresh water, not rain. And how do they do that? Well, trees produce spore through their stomata bacteria. Lots and lots of bacteria goes up in the air from the trees and acts as the germ or the condensation mechanism for water vapor. First, the tiny water vapor that becomes clouds and then later becomes rain. So trees are going to generate the small hydrological cycle. Like here in the Dundas Valley, we have many, many trees. We've got quite a stable climate as a result. You remember that picture I had up at the beginning where there's forest fingers coming in and around all our houses. So that's a couple of aspects of why he emphasizes the trees for life.
Thank you.
John Kemp summarizes it this way. Think of your soil as a biology lab, not a physics lab, not a chemistry lab. You got living things down there. Our job as stewards, here he is an Amishman, we're creating the needed physical environment. We're stewards of the physical environment. We know that when we wreck the place by rototilling or by not cover cropping or growing corn, soy year after year, we've got to put that biology back. Or the potato farmers out here at Copetown, 5 or 10 fumigation treatments a year. That doesn't leave much mycorrhizal fungi left. Feed the mulch or grow cover crops in between your row crops, in between your vegetable row crops. Yes, there's some science in here about the balancing of the nutrition, but I was trying to stay away from that. Most of us won't spend 30 or 40 bucks to get a soil test. We're going to count worms instead. We're going to make bokashi and make active fungal compost piles so that we know we've got live bacteria bringing mineral into our garden beds. We'll learn a little bit about watering on the leaves with biostimulants. which are as simple as making a tea out of your compost pile. Just put it, some of it in a bag, let it leach into a barrel of water for a couple of days till it gets nice and stinky, and then water that on your foliars. That will, short course for that is simply you're trying to outcompete the bad guy bacteria with good bad guy bacteria, which are in your soil. If you've got that white mildewy cover on your soil, on your squashes, go make some compost tea and get out there and water it, even a couple times a day. It'll help. So chat, I gotta post this stuff. I don't know how I'm gonna do that. I can't grab that. It'll go in the chat though before we're done. We've got some time still to do question and answer. Thank you for your attention. I hope everybody didn't fall asleep on me. I couldn't see. I couldn't see you. So now I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Kaboom, we're back. And what's in the chat?
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Ian. There was a question in the chat from Barbara asking if the information will be shared. And Zoe responded that it will be available and that we'll set up a link for that.
Yeah. It'll be a couple of places. It'll probably be on Action 13's cloud drive, and it'll probably be on our CPL drive as well.
I'll start off with the question, Ian, and just circling back to the tilling, the no-till versus low-till. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. I covered off the zero till, didn't I? And low till and no till. It's really applies more to farmers, people who are growing, broadacre crops for the grain or for the forage on it. And it's very hard to plant your seed into a trashy field, what they call a trashy field, that's got the dead seed, the dead foliage from the last crop, or from the weeds if there's any of those. So they're not so low tillage would be going into that field with a disc cultivator. That's where you've got these things that look like scallop discs, and they can go up and down and they can tear that material up a little bit, or a tine cultivator, or even now there's new equipment being invented where they'll compact it at the same time and embed it in the soil so that now they can seed into it. And so that's low tillage. And no tillage, whereas those farmers are trying to not go on that field at all, to overturn the soil, turn it upside down. If you're thinking of a cornfield, after they take the if they're taking it off for the corn itself, that's one thing. And they're just taking the cobs. If they're taking it off for the silage, they're taking all that biomass off and hardly leaving anything behind. If they're gardening in this new regenerative way, trying to feed the soil, they will either have planted an intercropped plant in between the corn grows before it's up too high, clover or buckwheat, or they'll go on the field after they've taken the crop off and plant again. Let that, and there's many ways of doing that. It's a bit bigger of a topic than I think we want, but some of those crops will die with the frost, and they'll bed right down, feed the worms and the critters, so that it's a clean field in the spring. So low and zero are kind of variations on not doing what has traditionally been the way of the moldboard plow, turning it upside down after you've taken your crop off and leaving it open all winter long. I am trying to get to a slide so that I can, yes, I'm almost there. There. Are you still with me, folks?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put this online survey in the chat. And I'm going to put, this is a plug for another project, which I am eager to see us happen. One reason for us to be interested in healthy soil is because growing at least some of our own food is one way to make our lifestyles more resilient in the face of climate crisis. Climate crisis is going to hit. It's already hit other places much more severe than us. We are in a sweet spot in the Great Lakes Basin here. Probably we may not even feel the economic impact of it, because why? There's thousands of people who are trying to clamber in and get in here with the rest of us. And we've got a federal government who really wants they really want to bring in all sorts of immigrants with money who will end up keeping us, the rest of us, in jobs. I don't agree. I think we're going to have a problem with that. But suffice to say, we should be thinking about how we're going to retrofit our suburban lifestyles to be more resilient and self-sufficient and self-sufficient among ourselves. So this isn't working. I'm getting impatient. I can only do that. I'll have to leave it to you for the moment. I wanted to give you the survey, the survey that you could on your own go and fill in and say, how am I doing in my family, in my household, my house and my yard? Here's 25, 30 questions. How am I doing? And oh, I think it just went up. Yeah, Teresa.
I have a question. So I have just a small raised bed at home. I live in Dundas, and every fall I put leaves on it. And I just do that because I always thought it was good. But what I've been doing is in the spring, I take the leaves off. But listening to you, I'm thinking, should I leave them on and dig my seeds and plants in around them? Should I not be removing the leaves?
No, that's a great idea. Good and an excellent detail, finessing question. When you put your leaf and your mulch on your plant beds in the fall after you finish growing, leave it on all winter long. It's going to keep the worms are going to be pulling it down from underneath. It's going to hold moisture. In the spring, you want to warm your bed up. It's a good idea to pull that mulch back and just pull it into the aisle and then plant into the bare bed. You'll notice if you don't pull it back, it's still going to be hard as rock compared to your lawn. So that shows you the difference. Peas you can plant into rock, peas you can plant into barely thawed ground, but everything else you have to wait till it warms up. Even like tomatoes till it gets to be about 75 degrees. So that's the reason why pulling it back. And then after the plants are up a little bit, either from seed or seedlings, then you got your compost there. You can sprinkle it in and around and mulch it all summer long. Now you're cooling. Now you're making a sponge for the soil, for the rain. You won't have to water as much, and you're feeding the microbes.
So pull it back and put, like you said, something dark on it. Should I be doing that right now, or should I be doing it in the month?
No, not now. Do it in the spring. Oh yeah, now. Duh. This is spring. Yeah, if you've got some dark landscape fabric and you want to try that experiment, pull your mulch back, lay out your mulch, hold it down with some, make some sandbags or something, or throw some dirt on the edges of it.
Yeah.
Leave it there for 1 or 2 weeks, and then you have warmed your soil up a little bit, and you'll be ready to plant after you what they call stale cultivating. Just run your cultivator through that, and it'll disturb the weeds a little bit, and they'll die. And so you won't have to do that first heavy weeding if you do that.
So
So,
this is,
oh,
I was always concerned that if I did that weeding that way, that the weeds would still be in there and grow again. But if I'm pulling them out that way, they actually die. They don't go back in and grow again. Like I thought I had to pull them and get them out.
No, no, leave them on the top. As long as they get some of they get disturbed from their underground sources, and those root hairs get exposed a little bit to sunlight. They just fry on a sunny day.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah.
So Ian, would you recommend, because they now they offer those mulch sheets, those kind of black UV kind of, they absorb UV light. Would you recommend well, I guess it depends on your space, right? Would you recommend for like a smaller yard someone to use like a sheet or like a heavy tarp, or to actually use a more natural means like the leaves?
Well, yeah, we're combining ideas here. When we're mulching, we want to use biomass, leaves, lawn clippings, hay and straw, those kind of things during the growing season and at the beginning of the fall through the winter. Now it gets a little, some people, they're weed phobic. They don't want any weeds. There is this plastic, so-called biodegradable plastic you can buy to put over your bed and plant through it. I don't use it. A lot of organic people do use it because we gotta pay somebody to go out there and weed, which adds quite a lot of cost. JM48 is one that does use it. That's a different kind of plastic than I was talking about. I was talking about that woven stuff that's called landscape fabric. It's heavier. You want to put on to do this occultation thing or warming your seed bed, your garden bed before you plant into it, and you're going to leave it only on for a couple weeks and then pull it off. There's really no one only way here, folks. Be willing to experiment a little bit. I'm thinking, well, maybe in the fall you've got your leaves, your nice soggy wet leaves. You spread them on. You've stolen them from all the neighbors who's bagging them up, and you want them on your garden. Well, now you can cover that over with a tarp. No harm with doing that. Yeah. Somebody's written in here, soil temp determines best time to plant rather than air temp. Yes, true. So get a little thermometer. You can buy them at the hardware store. That will give you from really from 0 up to 90 or 100. That's all you really need. Stick it in the soil, go around, check it out. Or you go to Lee Valley, get one of those that'll tell you it'll be a soil temperature probe with an RTF transmitter, and you can have the soil temperature read out on beside your bed on your night table, and you can be right up to speed on it. Yeah, Zoe's on a hand for a question.
Thanks, Ian. Where I live, the topsoil was largely removed when they built the home, and so there's a lot of clay. What resource would you recommend if I start Googling or trying to find some tips on what specifically to do? What would you recommend?
For a garden or for a lawn?
It's a combination of both.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to give you any advice on lawns because I'm anti-lawn, but first thing I do, like we did at Rebecca's, I go out and dig a hole, see how far you can dig a hole if you can, a foot deep. If it's like you say, you won't even be able to get that far. And in good soil, you're going to be able to get down a couple of feet. And anyway, we didn't mention something. This is a good segue. You'll find out there talk about something called double digging your garden bed. Most people say not necessary. Yes, you can still grow vegetables, but it is a good idea to dig that first level of dirt down and the bottom and set that plunk of soil aside. You're digging down a row like you can imagine towards me, and the next shovel of dirt that you're taking from the top, put it in that place but first, with your fork, this is going to be with a garden fork, just get in there that far deep. So now you're second down deep. This is the way you're going to be loosening up your sole, Zoe. Just wiggle it. Don't take it out. Just use your garden fork, get it loose, and then put that. And so you're going from the top over here to the bottom over here, and then from the and then go. I'm trying to watch myself on the screen, and there's a big lag. Doesn't work. So then you're gonna in your gardens. You probably will do raised beds, and depending on your budget, you'll probably bring in some topsoil. You don't need to spend top dollar for it. You can layer it like you saw in that one of that picture. You can go to Beswick or any of the other treat. They got a big yard up there in Hamilton. Up in Dundas, big yard full of wood chips. I don't know if they'll deliver or not. You're going to layer things down there. You can come and get some compost from me and maybe put some soil on top that you might have got from the dirt depot. And now you're ready to go. You've got your bed about that thick, maybe a foot on top of that 2 inches of topsoil you had before. And then let the biology rule. One of the things you're going to go look for at William Dam Seeds is called forage radish or turnips, forage turnips and radishes. They're honking big roots as big as your arm. And you're going to plant those when you've finished. You can plant them any old time. It'd be fun to plant them now because you can actually eat them when they're small. But you want to leave them in your garden bed at the end of your season. And they're called tiller radish or tiller. And they're going to dig a root, maybe even a foot, 2 feet down. And you're going to leave them in the ground. They're going to rot. They're going to make a hole where they were, and water and detritus is going to fall down in there. And what are you doing? You're inoculating the fungal soil food web biology 2 feet deep into your clay. In a couple of years, that clay is going to be game over. It's now going to be it's going to have pockets of humus and and it's going to be so there's two ideas for you, Zoe. One with double digging and one with a raised bed, and we can talk about that over the time, how it goes. Rachel.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions, but I won't ask them all. Can I have your contact though, and maybe come visit your farm sometime?
Oh, I love that kind of question. So yeah, so you'll find, just Google Old 99 Farm, and you'll find me on Facebook. I can't type what I'm thinking.
I'll just ask one because I just dealt with it today, but yeah, I'm managing some land and it's mainly been, we usually use a rototiller to do our bed prep. And so in the fall, we did a bunch of composting and cover cropping, and in the spring we're doing a lot of tarping, and I'm trying to move away from the tilling. But today, after broad forking some of the beds, there was maybe 6 inches deep of clay, just clay, and then the top 6 inches was compost. And I guess, so yeah, I broad forked it all, and then I'm putting the tarp back over. But direct seeding, for no-till, are you just direct seeding into that much compost? Or I also have a rotary plow to pick soil onto the top beds?
Lucky you. I want that piece of equipment. you behind a walkable tractor?
Yeah, we have a
Yeah.
BCS.
The BCS, yeah. Maybe I could borrow it from you sometime when see if I like it. But
Yeah.
here's your core question. I think it is not seedable, especially when we're using a seed drill, like an Easy Way seed drill, where you push the machine, this light little plastic thingy along in a row. It has to be dead smooth and fairly well compacted. And so JM Fortier will say, look, true confessions, I don't till deep. I just till the first inch as light as possible to get. I'm exterminating the bacteria in the first inch, but there's lots of it underneath that. They're going to grow back up into it. Just like I don't want to leave plastic on too long and get it overheated too far down. The first inch, they'll repopulate that. So go ahead in that first little bit. Just don't use it as your major cultivation technique.
Right.
You don't really care if those clumps of clay and subsoil are broken right down. You really don't, because you let the air get in there, the water get in there, and you feed the biology, ultimately the worms. They'll do all that work for you, I believe.
Thanks.
Yeah, Carol and Dave. Hi.
Hi, it's Dave here. I did send a chat message earlier, but we're in Dundas. We're on Highland Clay. The year we moved in here about 7 years ago, I had to put a fence up. Digging the fence post holes, I could have sold what I got out for to a potter. It was that fine and wet. Now, I have used a technique of covering them with mulch leaves, like the ground leaves in the fall, and then digging them deep in down to about 1.5 feet in the spring. We now have friable, relatively nice soil down to about 1 foot in the vegetable garden. It's black, it's nice and black. But I mean, am I violating the rules, or am I just sensibly building the soil from scratch, the topsoil from scratch? We have lots of biology in there. I am a biologist, and I've got quite a life list of what lives in there. So it's
I applaud you for sticking with it. That heavy clay is now behind you. The good thing about clay, it's got a high capacity to hold mineral, and so it's very fertile. You just can't have too much of it. Like 10. So a third kind of percentage is fine.
I measured ours. Did actually a soil test. Measured ours at 90+% clay.
Ooh, yeah. Did you do that little shake a jar test where you're letting? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then you got some more ways to go still. You're growing vegetables in it, though, you say?
But I do have to till for root crops. For parsnips and carrots and turnips, I've got to go down a foot with a hand tiller. But
well, I would discourage you from using the tiller. I'd use a broad fork if you could, just because the tiller really, they only got a wheel on them about 6 inches, right?
I use like what do they call it? Weasel. Oh, it's not the weasel. It's anyway, it's a horizontal tiller where you just do it by hand, but it just lifts the soil. Digs a great post hole too. You can go down about 2 feet with it.
I can't picture it. Sorry. But if you send me a picture of it, we can talk offline and then get you going. There's quite a bit of work to do this so-called lasagna gardening or sheet mulching, because you bring in a lot of truckloads of material in for 20 by 20 garden. People aren't going to do that. Bit by bit, a couple of loads, yes. That's where Elaine Ingham got the point. If you're making good compost, you're making compost tea out of it, you can inoculate your bed, and you can make that compost go a long, long way to feed the biology that's in there in your garden.
Yeah, bring about a cubic meter of fine compost from leaves and grass clippings and stuff every year. It's very, very fine. So that goes on every year, but things are coming along. But I just don't know how you would get started without 5 years of non-productivity.
Oh yeah, no, you don't. Yeah, well, it's like trying to grow in a parking lot. Yeah. And people who have pavement backyards, they can do container gardening, and they can do raised beds gardening but they're laying out some cash for 1 by 12s. Depends on how bad you want to garden. I think we should be thinking about, how bad we want to be resilient. Grow some of our own food at least.
Yeah, well, we grow about half our vegetables for the year, so that's
Sweet. Good for you. I applaud you.
Uh,
You're going to do the next talk.
well, we're gonna pick our first salads this week, so that's
I love it. We'll take some pictures and put them up on either of those sites. Post them up to the right. So people can post pictures and things to the Drive Cloud.
We haven't set up that site for posting yet.
Okay.
But the calendar is publicly available, which has links to events like this. But yeah, and just a quick question, because I see that Stephen is waiting with a question as well. But for the people that attended this evening, CPL has all of their email addresses through the Eventbrite. Is that right?
We think so. Yes.
Okay. So, I think Barb just stepped off. Oh, there she. Yeah. So we'll follow up with the recording link that way. Okay. Maybe time for Steve's question, and then.
Sure. And pictures from everybody can go on the Facebook, either the CPL Community Permaculture Lab Facebook or Action 13's Facebook. Yeah, Steve.
Yeah, Ian, thanks. My question's about biochar, and from what I've been reading and hearing, like this is something that would be a pretty good thing to be adding to our compost or our gardens to, one, retain carbon or sequester carbon, but then also for all of the really kind of micro pores and things like that to help build the biology and nutrient retention and water retention. And I just wonder if you've had any experience with that or have any thoughts on it.
Yes, I make biochar here, and I use it. I put it in the manure pack, and I put it in the chicken litter. It's a good odor depressor and a nitrogen absorber. I didn't mention it. It would have fit under that mineral nutrient piece, I think. But now that you've got it on the schedule, it's great. It's a good idea. Multiple benefits. First, as a condominium for the microbes. Second, as a sponge for water, and well, I can't think of anything else. And how you make it is really easy too. You can do it in your fireplace if you got a wood fireplace at home. Just take some of those big pieces out that haven't quite burned out yet, or put a metal. I put a little metal box inside my wood stove behind me here. I don't know if you can see it. Dingo right there. And the little metal box is one of those stainless steel things that you see in food steam stables on salad bars. And it's got a loose fitting lid. You put your wood chips in there, put it in your wood fire or in your outdoor fire, and then it'll pyrolyze. So now you've got a source of charcoal. You could go to the store and buy charcoal too. And then you're going to just put it between a couple of tarps and drive over it with your car, pulverize it, and now you've got the raw material. But now this is where everybody makes a mistake. They use it straight away in their gardens. They don't inoculate it first, either with a compost tea, or with urine, or with any kind of inoculants that you're buying in a jug from all the people who want to sell us stuff, or your Bacassi mix. All these benefits, put that in your biochar for a couple weeks and then use it, because it's going to fill up all the pores. If you were to look at that under a microscope, it would look like a lattice, different shapes of lattice depending on what kind of feed material it came from, different woods, and so on. But does that answer? Yes, it's great. Do it. Just don't put it in dry right away after you make it. Dave's eating his greens out of his garden. I love it. Isn't that great? Isn't that great, everybody? This too could be you. I'm gonna steam them for dinner. I think how are we doing for? It's 7:30. Holy mackerel! We started at 7:20. I started about quarter after, I think. So I'm, that feels like longer than an hour. Are we tired yet? Any more questions? Is that a hand for the new question or the old question, Dave? Aha! Show us your turnip. Off
Maybe-
mute.
Maybe one more question, Ian. You'd
Yeah.
mentioned about a nutrient density something or other as part of your talk there very briefly. And I was
Yeah.
just wondering about that.
Right. I'll go get my prototype. But the Bionutrient Food Association is an outfit in the States that started up 10 years ago by an organic farmer, son of an organic farmer named Dan Kittredge. It's a great outfit, and they have got one of their projects is the Real Food Campaign. Knowing Dan knows from growing organic food all his life that just because it's organic, it doesn't mean it's high nutrient density. And now they've got 1 year of data under their belt, just with a couple of crops, like I think spinach, lettuce, and carrots, and there are thousands of samples. And it's basic. It's a spectrophotometer, and so they're shooting the outside tissue, and they're getting some kind of a reading, which, as you know from spectrophotometry, everything gives off a wave signature, and they're aggregating the things that they consider nutritious, like potassium, well, all the minerals and vitamins. I don't know if they're measuring vitamins, but minerals, yes. And they're getting an aggregate measure, and they're going to tell you that this carrot has better nutrition in it than this carrot. So you could eventually, the idea is you're going to go into a supermarket with this gizmo and your cell phone, and it's going to tell you, don't buy that carrot, buy this one. They just got $1 million grant from a big European venture capitalist to get this thing to market. So it's a real McCoy.
Do you have one?
Yeah, I got one, but it looks like this.
Well, I was thinking like a big lab bench or something.
I got to plug it in. Got a handle on it, and believe it or not, I haven't used it. So, truth be known, this could be a decoy. But that's what it's going to be like. As easy as that. Plug your USB cable on the line, and
Ian, your audio turned down.
finally, consumers are going to be
Oh.
empowered to
Ian, we can't
grow
hear
healthy
you.
food. And did you hear any of that?
No.
Yeah, just a bit.
Finally, consumers are going to be empowered to grow healthy food.
That's awesome.
Yeah, instead of cereals where the cardboard has more nutrition in the box than in the contents. We got to stay healthy. If what I think is coming down the pike is coming down the pike, either financial or climate or biodiversity or weather, we're going to need to get way more self-sufficient. We can't get sick. We have to pay our farmers now because there won't be a pharmacy, or we won't have the money to pay them later. Hence, growing more of our own food, even just buying healthy food, we're ahead of the curve. Deborah says we're doing lots of testing with bokashi composting. Stay tuned for an upcoming event. Yes, we're going to have a great bokashi event. I'd like to see somebody do an event like between Dave and Zoe. Can you two guys get together, check out each other's backyard and do a little talk like this on how I converted my concrete cement backyard to an edible food forest.
Well, the skunks are helping with aerating at our property, so we let them. They can work on the top layer, but it looks like we've gone through the questions that came in. So, Ian, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to prepare all those materials and put everything together. I think that was really well received, and there was a little bit of everything in there, so people can hopefully take it back and make some magic happen in their gardens. And this is sort of a co-event between the CPL and Action 13, but we'll connect with those of you that have attended and provide the link, I guess, to the recording, and there may be some other resources we could drop in there as well. Just before we wrap up, Deborah, I think you had a quick update about an event that you wanted to share, the bike and garden tour, and then maybe the growing. We're going to transition just very briefly after this session. This is typically our meeting space or meeting time for our Growing Together Action Hub. So if we could keep those people on the line just for a quick few minutes of Growing Together business after your update, Deb. Thanks.
If I could just add in, folks who haven't had experience with Action 13 are welcome to kind of stay on as well. I can't promise it'll be as engaging, but we are planning some April events happening in Dundas related to kind of the intersection of gardening and climate action. So if that's something of interest to you, we'd love to make sure you're included. So yeah, it's a permission to leave and an invitation to stay all at once, depending on what you need. But yeah, Deborah, why don't you start us off?
Okay, I'm so glad everybody